You have already lost more opportunities thinking than your enemies took from you by acting. Think honestly. How many times did you have a clear idea, a genuine impulse to do something important, and then your mind started, what if it doesn't work? What if I look ridiculous? What if it's not the right time? What if there's a better way? And while you were thinking, while you were simulating scenarios, while you were weighing pros and cons, someone less qualified than you simply acted, and they reaped the result that should have been yours. This is the vicious cycle of modern man. Analyze until the opportunity dies. Plan until the motivation evaporates. Prepare until the moment passes. And then you convince yourself that you were prudent, that it was smart to wait, that the right decision was not to decide yet. But deep down, you know the truth. You weren't being cautious. You were being cowardly, disguised as prudence. It is fear dressed as rationality. It is the ego trying to ensure you never fail, and because of that, ensuring you never truly try. The real cost of overthinking does not appear in a bank account. It appears in the conversations you never had, in the relationships that never started because you spent 6 months thinking about the perfect approach, in the businesses that never got off the ground because you needed one more course, one more research, one more guarantee, and the workouts that never happened because you were deciding which program was the best one. And the most brutal part? We live in the age where this only gets worse. You have access to infinite information. You could research any decision from 1,000 different angles, read contradictory opinions, watch endless analyses, and every new piece of data does not give you clarity, it gives you more doubt. Your grandparents did not have this problem. They had limited information, and they acted. They made mistakes, adjusted, moved on. You have unlimited information, and you paralyze, you simulate, ponder, postpone. But there is a method to break out of this. It is not modern. It does not involve apps or productivity techniques. It is a 400-year-old system, forged in real duels where overthinking meant instant death, a method that transforms mental paralysis into immediate action through brutal discipline. And if you continue, I will show you exactly how a man who never lost a battle destroyed overthinking, not through more reflection, but through principles that eliminate the possibility of hesitation. But before we get into the method, you need to accept a truth your mind will hate to hear. Overthinking is not a sign of intelligence. It is cowardice disguised as prudence. It is fear dressed as rationality. It is the ego trying to ensure you never fail, and because of that, ensuring you never truly try.
Miyamoto Musashi was 13 years old when he killed his first man in a duel. It was not luck, it was not an accident, it was decisive action while the opponent was still calculating. 60 duels throughout his life, 60 victories, 0 defeats. Many of those combats were to the death. One mistake cost everything, and Musashi never made a fatal mistake. When he finally retired to a cave in the mountains to write, he did not create abstract philosophy. He wrote the Book of 5 Rings as a survival manual. Every principle was tested in situations where hesitation meant immediate death. And the central principle he repeated in different ways throughout the entire book is this: there is no thought in the sword. In the moment of the cut, there is only the cut. This is not poetry. It is a technical description of how to win in mortal combat. When your sword is raised, the opponent is in front of you, and you start to think, you have already lost. If you think, should I attack now or wait one more second? You lose speed. If you think, should I cut from the right or the left? You lose precision. If you think, what if he counterattacks? You lose initiative. The warrior who thinks during the strike is the warrior who dies. Musashi developed the concept of mushin, mind without mind, a state where action flows without interference from the analytical ego. You trained, you prepared, you studied. And now, in the real moment, you shut down conscious thought and let the body execute. Your movements are faster because they do not pass through the filter of doubt. They are more precise because they are not distorted by fear. They are more fluid because they are not interrupted by hesitation. Now connect this to your life. You are not in duels with swords, but you are losing mental battles every day. The opportunity to talk to someone you are interested in, the decision to start that project, the choice to have that difficult conversation, the moment to change careers. And in each of these situations, you do exactly what the defeated swordsman does. You think during the strike. You analyze when you should be acting. You simulate when you should be executing. And while you think, the moment passes. The person leaves. The opportunity closes. The motivation evaporates. And you are left with the phantom feeling that you could have done something if only you had acted instead of thinking. Musashi had a brutal line about this. Know the way in all things, then let the body act. See the structure, know the way. This is preparation, study, training, strategic reflection before the battle. You think deeply about principles, about general strategy, about who you want to be as a warrior. But then, let the body act. In the real moment, no thought, no doubt, no renegotiation. The body already knows what to do because you prepared. Now, you just execute. The difference between preparation and paralysis is timing. You think before, you act during, you adjust after, but never, ever do you think when you should be acting. And here is the brutal test. In the last 24 hours, how many times did you have a clear impulse to do something, and then your mind started to negotiate? How many times did you know what you needed to do, but stayed ruminating until the moment passed? Every time that happened, you lost an internal duel. And unlike Musashi's duel where death came quickly, in the mental duel, death is slow. You don't realize you are dying. You just feel that life is getting smaller, safer, duller. Musashi said that the warrior's path is to accept death. When you truly accept that you might fail, that you might look foolish, that you might make a mistake, the fear of acting disappears because there is nothing left to protect. You have already accepted the worst possible scenario. And paradoxically, when you stop trying to guarantee success through infinite analysis, you start to achieve success through consistent action.
But here a question arises. Musashi says not to think during action. So, are we talking about acting impulsively, without reflection, without planning? No. And to understand the crucial difference, we need another master. Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome. He ruled the largest empire in the world. He commanded armies. He made decisions that affected millions. And at the same time, he was a Stoic philosopher. He thought deeply. He reflected constantly. He wrote his meditations every night. So, how did he solve this paradox? How to be a deep thinker and a decisive warrior at the same time? The answer lies in one of his most powerful lines. You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius understood the distinction that most people confuse. There is thinking about what to do, and there is thinking during the execution. Thinking about is strategy, it is reflection, it is wisdom. You analyze the situation, you consider options, you weigh consequences, you consult principles, and you make a decision. This is mental power well used. But thinking during is paralysis. It is doubt. It is weakness. You have already decided. Now you are renegotiating in the middle of execution. This is not wisdom. It is fear trying to make you retreat. Marcus Aurelius practiced something specific. He made his important decisions in the morning, mind clear,
without immediate pressure. He reflected on his principles, on what a stoic emperor would do, on which action was aligned with virtue. And then, throughout the day, he executed without questioning. He did not renegotiate his morning decisions. He trusted that he made the best possible decision with the information he had, and he acted accordingly. This is completely different from what most people do. They make a decision in the morning and spend the whole day re-deciding. Should they really do that? What if they are wrong? Maybe it's better to postpone. Maybe it's better to do it differently. And at the end of the day, they have done nothing because they spent all their energy renegotiating instead of executing. Connect Musashi with Marcus Aurelius. The warrior thinks before the battle. The emperor decides in the morning, but both execute without hesitation when the moment comes. The dividing line is clear. Planning is power. Constantly rethinking is weakness. And here is the question that exposes where you are on this spectrum. How many times did you change your mind about the same decision in the last week? I'm not talking about adjusting due to new information. I'm talking about going back and forth on the same decision because your mind won't stop simulating scenarios. If you do this regularly, you are not being cautious. You are being governed by fear. And fear, disguised as prudence, is the most common mental prison of modern man.
But where does this fear that disguises itself as thought come from? Why is it so difficult to simply decide and act? The answer lies with another master, from a completely different tradition. Huineng was illiterate. He worked selling firewood. He never had a formal education, and he became the sixth patriarch of Zen Buddhism, one of the most influential spiritual masters in Chinese history. How? Through a radical understanding of the nature of the mind. Huineng taught the concept of shoshin, the beginner's mind. And the principle is paradoxical. The more you know, the more your mind becomes attached to learned patterns and fears. The less you know, the freer you are to simply perceive and act. Let that sink in. Knowledge can imprison you. I'm not talking about ignorance as a virtue. I'm talking about the difference between wisdom and mental accumulation. Wisdom is digested knowledge that becomes instinct. Mental accumulation is unprocessed knowledge that becomes a barrier. Have you ever seen a child learning to walk? They fall, they get up, they try again. No drama, no internal story about being bad at walking, no fear that other children will judge them. They just try until they succeed. Now observe an adult learning something new. The mind is full of resistance. What if I fail? What if people laugh? What if I find out I'm not good at this? All this mental narrative prevents the simple action of trying. Huineng called this a polluted mind, not in the moral sense, but in the sense of being full of patterns, beliefs, and fears accumulated over the years. And the fuller your mind is, the harder it is to simply act. He had a brutal teaching about this. When I walk, I just walk. When I eat, I just eat. It seems too simple to be profound, but observe what happens when you try to do this. When you walk, your mind is thinking about where you should be. When you eat, your mind is on your phone or planning the next appointment. You are never fully present in the action you are doing. There is always a layer of thought separating you from the direct experience. And this intensifies when the action involves risk. When you are going to have that difficult conversation, your mind is not in the conversation. It is simulating how the other person will react. When you are going to start that project, your mind is not on the first step. It is worried about the final result. Expert mind versus beginner's mind. The expert looks at a new situation and immediately categorizes it. This is like that time it went wrong, or that bad experience I had, or that pattern that always frustrates me. And even before acting, he has already decided how it will end. The beginner's mind looks at the same situation and sees possibility. It does not know how it will end. It is not sure of the outcome, and precisely because of this, it is free to experiment without paralyzing fear. Now, connect this with overthinking. You overthink because your mind is polluted, full of negative experiences that you project into the future, full of limiting beliefs about who you are and what you can do, full of stories about how things are that do not let you see how things could be. And every time you try something new, instead of simply doing it, you carry all that mental weight with you, all the times you failed before, all the times you were rejected, all the times you weren't good enough, and that weight is what creates the paralysis. If you are enjoying this depth, subscribe to the channel now, because the content here is not superficial. It is for men who want real clarity, not just temporary motivation.
But why do we carry this weight? Why does the mind accumulate all these negative patterns and use them against us? Carl Jung has the most brutal answer. The ego is the psychic structure that creates your sense of identity. You have continuity. You are someone. You exist as an entity separate from the world. And the ego maintains this through narratives. I am someone who is good at this. I am someone who fails at that. I am someone people see in a certain way. And the fundamental job of the ego is to ensure your psychic survival, not your physical survival, your survival as an identity. Here is where overthinking comes in. When you face a high-risk situation, the ego goes on alert. Risk is not physical danger. It is the danger of annihilation of the self-image. What if I try and fail? Then I will have to admit I am not who I think I am. What if I get rejected? Then I will have to accept I am not as valuable as I imagined. These questions are not rational. They are ego protection mechanisms. And overthinking is the tool the ego uses to keep you safe. It works like this. You have the impulse to do something risky. Ask for a raise, start a business, talk to someone you are attracted to. Immediately, the ego activates the simulation system. What if it goes wrong? What if I'm not ready? What if there's a better way? And while you simulate, you do not act. And while you do not act, the ego remains intact. You are not rejected because you did not try. You did not fail because you did not start. And the ego can maintain the illusion that you would be successful if you tried. The moment you try and are rejected, that fantasy dies. And the ego prefers to live in untested potential than in confirmed reality. This is not moral judgment. It is a description of a psychological mechanism. But you need to see this mechanism working in you, because only what is seen can be changed. So here is the question Jung would ask. What are you calling thinking well that is in fact just fear of failure? Where in your life are you using analysis as an excuse to avoid risk? Where are you confusing prudence with cowardice? Comment below one area where you know you are overthinking instead of acting. No explanation, no justification, just name it. Work, relationship, health, business, which one? Because the first step to breaking free from mental paralysis is to admit where you are stuck.
Now let's translate all of this into neuroscience. Because overthinking is not just philosophical or psychological. It is literally encoded in the structure of your brain. Andrew Newberg is a neuroscientist specializing in how contemplative practices affect the brain. He scanned meditating Buddhist monks, deep-state Zazen practitioners, people in intense prayer. And he discovered something fundamental about the neural network responsible for overthinking. It's called the default mode network, DMN. It is a set of brain regions that activate when you are not focused on a specific external task, when you are on autopilot, when your mind wanders. And this network has an important evolutionary function. It simulates future scenarios, reviews the past, creates narratives about who you are, plans, anticipates, imagines. The problem? In modern man, this network is hyperactive. It never turns off. And when it is excessively active, you have what is clinically called rumination, loop thinking, chronic worry, pathological overthinking. Newberg's studies showed something fascinating. When Zen monks enter a deep state of meditation, especially practicing Zazen or contemplating koans, the default mode network temporarily shuts down. The neural network responsible for internal narrative, for scenario simulation, for worrying about the past and future, it stops. And what happens? The monks report a state of mushin, mind without mind, exactly what Musashi described. It is not a coincidence. It is the same neurological phenomenon described in different languages. Now connect this with action. When you are overthinking, your prefrontal cortex is hyperactive. This is the brain region responsible for analysis, planning, conscious decision-making. It is the most evolved part of the human brain. And when it works well, it allows you to think strategically. But when it is excessively active during execution, it paralyzes you. Because constant analysis competes with fluid action. You cannot process verbally and execute motorically at the same time with maximum efficiency. Here is the brutal chemistry. Excess analysis maintains high activation in the prefrontal cortex. This creates decision paralysis. You get stuck in a loop of cognitive processing without ever reaching concrete action. But intuitive action, the type of action Musashi described, activates different structures: basal ganglia, cerebellum, regions responsible for automated movement, for learned skills that have become fluid. When you train something repeatedly, the brain transfers processing from the prefrontal cortex to these deeper structures. And once there, the action happens without the need for conscious verbal thought. This is why samurai trained kata, movements repeated thousands of times, not to memorize, but to transfer the execution from the thinking brain to the motor brain. And when the real duel came, the body knew what to do without the conscious mind needing to interfere. Direct translation to your life. The more you train an action, the less you need to think about it. Overthinking only happens in two situations: completely unknown territory where you have no developed motor pattern, or known territory where you have associated fear. If you have trained public presentations 100 times, you don't think during the presentation, you just present. But if you have fear of judgment, even with training, the fear reactivates the prefrontal cortex and creates overthinking. So the real problem is not a lack of preparation. It is unprocessed fear that prevents the neural transfer from conscious thought to automatic action. And here is the exercise that exposes this. For the next 60 seconds, just observe your mind. Do not try to control. Do not try to stop thoughts. Just count how many different thoughts arise in 1 minute. about the past, about the future, about what you should be doing, about how you are being perceived. Just observe. Do this now. 1 minute of pure observation. If you did it honestly, you probably counted between 20 and 40 distinct thoughts. That is a hyperactive mind, default mode network in overdrive. And that is not peace. It is constant mental noise that disguises itself as productive thought. But there is training for this, and it is exactly what the masters we discussed practiced without knowing the neuroscience behind it.
Now let's bring everything together. Musashi's philosophy, Marcus Aurelius' Stoicism, Huineng's Zen, Jung's psychology, Newberg's neuroscience. Everything converges into 3 practical pillars that you can apply immediately. This is not theory. It is a protocol tested in situations where a mistake cost life. And it works because it attacks the problem on 3 levels simultaneously: mental, emotional, neural. Pillar 1, morning decision, blind execution. Based on Musashi and Marcus Aurelius. The principle is simple but brutal. Every day, upon waking, before checking your phone, before checking messages, before anything else, you define 1 priority action. Not 3 actions, not 5 goals. 1 specific action that you will execute that day without negotiation. And here is the critical part. It has to be specific. It cannot be vague like work on the project. It has to be concrete. Write the first 500 words of Chapter 2. Call that client and make the proposal. Train chest and triceps at 6 in the morning. You write this down on paper. Don't type. Write it by hand. Because writing physically creates a stronger neural commitment. And you use this exact formula. Today, without negotiation, I will do this. And then throughout the day, 0 rediscussion. The decision has already been made when your mind was clear, when you were not under pressure, when your principles were accessible. Now you just execute. It doesn't matter if you wake up unwilling. It doesn't matter if distractions arise. It doesn't matter if your mind starts offering alternatives. The decision was made. The rest is mechanical execution. Musashi had a brutal phrase about this. Decide quickly, review never. It is not impulsivity. It is confidence that you made the best possible decision with the information you had, and now you act accordingly. Because here is the truth. You will never have complete certainty. You will never have perfect information. You will never eliminate all risk. And if you wait for ideal conditions, you never act. So you decide with what you have, and you execute without questioning, and you adjust later if necessary, but never, ever do you renegotiate during execution. This eliminates 90% of overthinking, because overthinking does not happen at the initial decision. It happens in the constant redecision, in the mental back and forth that drains all your energy without producing action. Apply this tomorrow. 1 action. Decide right now what it will be, and tomorrow, without negotiation, execute. Pillar 2, the 10-second ritual. Based on Jung and Huineng. This is for moments where you feel mental paralysis arriving in real time. You know what you need to do, but the ego is offering resistance. The mind is simulating reasons to postpone. It works like this. The moment you realize you're entering a thought loop instead of action, you count backwards. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And at 1, you execute the first possible physical action related to what you need to do. Not the full action, the first action. If you need to make a difficult call, you pick up the phone. If you need to write, you open the document. If you need to work out, you put on your shoes. Why does this work? Because it interrupts the ego loop. Jung would explain that you are cutting the protection circuit that the ego activated. You are not negotiating with fear. You are acknowledging that it exists and acting despite it. Neurologically, you are forcing motor activation. Physical movement temporarily shuts down the default mode network. You step out of mental simulation and into concrete action. And once in motion, continuing is easier than stopping. Huineng would say you are practicing the beginner's mind. Before thinking whether to act, you already act. Corrections come later, but first, movement. And here is the real power of this. You are not waiting for courage to appear. You are not waiting for motivation to arrive. You are using a mechanical technique to force action before overthinking takes control. 10 seconds. Countdown. First physical action. That's all. Simple, brutal, effective. Use this today. The next time you feel internal resistance before doing something you know you need to do not negotiate. Count 10 to 1, and at 1, move your body.
Pillar 3, the 3-minute warrior meditation. Based on Newberg and the Zen tradition, this is direct neural training. It is not to relax. It is not to feel good. It is to reprogram the default mode network and reduce chronic rumination. Every day, at the same time, you sit in silence for 3 minutes. Just 3. No music, no guide, no app. Absolute silence. And you do one thing. Focus on the breath. Deep inhale for 4 seconds. Pause for 4 seconds. Exhale for 6 seconds. Repeat. The goal is not to stop thoughts. It is to train attention. Your mind will wander. It will start to simulate. It will want to think about problems. And every time you notice that it has wandered, you gently bring it back to the breath. No judgment, no frustration, just notice and return. This is the training. It seems too simple to work, but Newberg's studies show that 30 days of daily 3-minute practice produces measurable changes. Reduction in default mode network activity, increase in attentional control, decrease in baseline anxiety. Direct translation, you become less stuck in loop thinking, more capable of consciously directing attention, more present in real action. And here is the progression. First week, you will feel you cannot do it. Your mind will seem uncontrollable. Second week, you start noticing thoughts faster. Third week, intervals of mental silence begin to appear. Fourth week, you have real control over when to enter and exit analytical mode. 3 minutes, every day, same time, no skipping for 30 days. This rewires your brain to tolerate presence without constant mental narrative. And when you can be present without overthinking for 3 minutes in meditation, you start to be able to be present without overthinking in real action.
Now see how the 3 pillars work together. Pillar 1 gives you structure. You decide in the morning what is important. This eliminates 90% of decisions throughout the day. You don't keep redeciding what to do. You already know. Pillar 2 gives you an emergency tool. When overthinking attacks in real time, you have a mechanical protocol. 10 seconds, physical action, loop broken. Pillar 3 gives you long-term neural reprogramming. You are training your brain to operate with less mental noise, to tolerate presence, to exist without constant narrative. And when you apply all 3 consistently, something fundamentally changes. It's not that you stop thinking, you stop being governed by thought. You still analyze, but analysis becomes a tool you use when necessary, not a prison you live in. You still reflect,
but reflection becomes a conscious practice, not automatic rumination. And most importantly, you develop what Musashi called the observing eye and the perceiving eye. The observing eye sees details, the perceiving eye sees the whole. And when you train the three pillars, you can switch between detailed analysis and fluid action without getting stuck in either. This is real freedom. It is not the absence of thought. It is mastery over when to think and when to act. Here is the central truth that connects all the masters. Thinking is not the problem. Thinking when you should be acting is cowardice masked as prudence. Musashi did not win 60 duels by being the physically strongest. He won by being the fastest to act without hesitation. While opponents were still calculating, he had already cut. Marcus Aurelius did not govern Rome by being the smartest. He governed by making clear decisions and executing without constantly renegotiating. Huineng did not become a Zen master by being the most educated. He became one by recognizing that an empty mind acts more precisely than a full mind. And all of them were describing the same phenomenon that Newberg measures in the lab, a neural state where action flows without interference from the analytical ego. You can achieve this state, not through more reflection, through applied discipline. 3 pillars, 30 days, absolute consistency. And at the end of those 30 days, you will not recognize how your mind operates. What once seemed impossible, decisions that previously paralyzed you, actions that previously required days of mental preparation, all of it will flow naturally. Not because you became smarter, but because you stopped using intelligence against yourself. Subscribe to the channel now if you want more content at this level of depth, and turn on notifications because what comes here is not temporary motivation. It is structural transformation.
We have reached the end, and I need to give you Musashi's final truth, the one that closes the entire method. The warrior's path is the resolute acceptance of death. Accept that you may fail, and the fear of thinking disappears. Let that sink in. Your overthinking is not protection, it is a prison. You think you are protecting yourself from failure through infinite analysis, but you are just preventing yourself from living fully. When you truly accept that you might make a mistake, that you might be rejected, that you might fail, you free yourself, because there is nothing left to protect. The worst-case scenario has already been accepted, and once accepted, you can act. Musashi knew this viscerally. Every duel he entered, he accepted that he could die, and precisely by accepting it, he fought without hesitation, without paralyzing fear, without overthinking the consequences. You do not face mortal duels, but you face situations where your ego might die, where your self-image might be destroyed, where you might discover that you are not who you thought you were. And your overthinking is an attempt to avoid these small deaths of the ego. But by avoiding them, you also avoid growth, because real growth always involves the death of a previous version of yourself. So here is the final challenge. What is the one decision you have been putting off for weeks or months? The one you know you need to make, but keep analyzing. Don't explain, don't justify, don't tell me why it's complicated. Just identify the action and comment below. One sentence, one concrete action. Call her, open the company, quit the job, start working out, have that conversation, finish that project, whatever it is. Because when you make it public, you create social consequence, and social consequence is fuel for discipline. It is harder to keep postponing when you have publicly declared your intention. And here is the protocol for the next 7 days. Apply Pillar 1 tomorrow. One morning decision, execution without negotiation. After 2 days applying Pillar 1, add Pillar 2. Use the 10 seconds every time you feel resistance. After 5 days with Pillars 1 and 2, add Pillar 3, 3 minutes of meditation every day. 7 days applying the 3 pillars, and on the 8th day, come back here and comment the result. It doesn't have to be dramatic, just honest. What changed in the way you act? Because this method is not theory. It is a protocol tested for 400 years. And it works because it attacks the problem at the root. Mental structure, emotional pattern, neural circuit, all together. Musashi's last line sums it all up. Stop thinking like a philosopher. Start acting like a samurai. A philosopher analyzes life. A samurai lives life. A philosopher contemplates possibilities. A samurai executes decisions. A philosopher seeks certainty. A samurai accepts uncertainty and acts anyway. You have a choice. Continue living in infinite analysis or start living in disciplined action. The method is here. The 3 pillars are clear. Now it is up to you alone. Philosophy is not meant to make you wiser. It is meant to make you more alive. And you are only truly alive when you are in action, not in a mental simulation of action. Which part of this teaching most confronted something real in you? Comment, and then apply it. Because knowledge without application is just intellectual entertainment. And you did not come here for entertainment. You came here for transformation. So transform. 3 pillars, 7 days. Start tomorrow.